So what is neuromarketing? Just as the name implies, it is a field that applies the ideas of neuroscience into the field of marketing. As dictionary.com states, neuromarketing involves the process of researching the brain patterns of consumers to reveal their responses to particular advertisements and products before developing new advertising campaigns and branding techniques. As a multidisciplinary field, the intrigue in neuromarketing is that it brings science and business together. While the field borrows primarily from neuroscience and marketing, it is technically influenced by all of the following. Although the field of neuromarketing is fairly new, the desire to look into the minds of people has long existed for decades. If we trace the field of neuroscience as far back, we can see that there has been scientific research on the brain since the ancient Egyptians. As written by German-American psychologist Ugo Münsterberg, an early pioneer in applied psychology, businessmen will eventually realize that customers are merely bundles of mental states, and that the mind is a mechanism that can affect with the same exactitude with which we can control a machine in a factory. Münsterberg was known as one of the first people to go on record of showing great interest in the field, tracing as far back as 1913. However, it wasn't until the 90s, with biomedical imaging technology advancing, that we began to reveal real insights from the neuroactivity of the human brain. The term neuromarketing was believed to be introduced by Dutch marketing professor Ale Smits in 2002, yet hard research and experimentation in the field was actually established since the 1990s. US marketing Professor Gerald Zeltman was one of the pioneers in this field, filing a patent 4 years before the term neuromarketing was ever even coined. This patent by Zeltman focused on using what was called the Zeltman Metaphor Elicitation Technique, or ZMET. This was a research tool for marketing that involved the exploration of people's conscious and unconscious thoughts. He did this by using specifically selected sets of images which would then elicit positive emotional responses, and in turn, stimulate a potential purchase. As Gerald Zeltman stated, a lot goes on in our minds that we're not aware of. Most of what influences what we say and do occur below the level of awareness. That's why we need new techniques to get at hidden knowledge, to get at what people don't know they know. Now, some might be wondering, what is the difference between neuromarketing and the field of neuroeconomics? In an article by Time called Brain Cells, they determined that neuromarketing served to be a subgenre of neuroeconomics. Even though some avid neuromarketers may believe it to be a completely separate field of its own, this belief isn't too far off, considering neuroeconomics involves a general study of neuroscience and decision-making. It is believed to be one of the first recorded neuromarketing experiments was done in Baylor College of Medicine in 2003, conducted by the professor of neuroscience Reed Montague, an American neuroscientist. Montague's study was an extension off of a 1975 challenge. The challenge had participants take a blind taste test between Pepsi and Coca-Cola and required them to indicate which they preferred out of the two. Interestingly, while the results showed that consumers preferred the taste of Pepsi, this preference did not translate properly into sales, as Coca-Cola had continued to beat Pepsi in revenue, year after year. Curious to see how our brains reacted to different brands, Montague conducted a similar study where he got a group of people to drink both Coke and Pepsi. Except this time, the participants were required to hook up to an fMRI machine. The study was able to reveal that the different parts of the brain lit up depending on whether the subjects were aware about what brand they were consuming. The results suggested that Coca-Cola elicited responses from our medial prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain associated with attention and short-term memory. People apparently stated a preference for Coke over Pepsi when knowing they were drinking Coke, yet when oblivious to which brand they were drinking, they reported to prefer Pepsi instead. In this case, the part of the brain that lit up was an area called the ventral putamen, a function for decision-making and reward perception. Now, it comes as no surprise that a field that focuses on understanding our brains to ultimately help sell more would be met with a lot of criticism. In fact, the aforementioned study gained a wave of criticism from people, as it was believed that neuromarketing was aimed at secretly tweaking our consciousness without us even knowing. Additionally, over the years since the field emerged, there have been plenty of people that have questioned the ethical standing of what neuromarketing does. as well as its overall effectiveness. In 2004, the Journal of Natural Neuroscience released an article titled Brain Scam, which looked at the ethics behind the field. The main issue brought up in the article was one of worry, specifically regarding the morality of neuromarketers as a whole. This sentiment was similarly expressed in the well-known Lancet Neurology journal, where the editor-in-chief of Science, Donald Kennedy, commented on his concern for how the technology could be used in the future. He questioned whether brain imaging would be used to infringe on personal privacy to a totally unacceptable degree. Another major hurdle that neuromarketing has faced over the years is whether or not it remains to be as effective as it claims. Oftentimes, the people doing the experiments are companies, which lack the personnel or machines to carry out the experiments in a well-controlled setting. Even when accurate results or data does come out from the experiments, the problem that often derives from this is that the people who are using the data do not know how to sufficiently use it. In many cases, companies that do neuromarketing research use EEG, which measures the electrical activity of the brain through a device that's placed on the subject's head. The problem with depending solely on this is that the signals are sensitive to interference from other electrical devices. Also, subjects often need to be very still, as any sudden movement can affect the results. This is different from EEG research done in labs, as usually experiments done in these environments are heavily shielded and are repeated several times for accuracy. Yet in the case of research done for marketing purposes, companies don't have all the time in the world to invest in a single experiment. Fast forward to today, the current landscape of marketing looks a whole lot different than even 10 years ago. Influencers, whether big or small, shape what we buy, and consumers hold a lot more power since the advent of social media. Bad reviews can do quite a lot of harm to a brand, which is why many companies need to be wary of how they represent themselves. We no longer live in a world where marketers have free rein to bombard consumers with everything they got. With tightening privacy regulations and more conscious consumers, they need to tread lightly, as too much blatant advertising can lead to distrust. Decades of market research and human psychology have shown that we respond to two main things: pain and pleasure. Storytelling also plays a large part to those two feelings, and governs whether someone feels invested in the brand or not. The generation of today, and possibly even more so of the future, will care more about being part of a larger cause than buying a product that lacks a story. Understanding behavior is the key to the future of marketing, and to gain a better grasp of what dictates our future, it stands that fields like neuromarketing will inevitably become needed, regardless of the criticism. While there are plenty of things to consider when using or applying neuromarketing tactics, the fact that it is still in its early phases show that there's hope for it to be shaped and used in a positive way. As technology continues to become more democratized every year, the major issue that the field needs to face is the ethical one, and whether it can overcome this, only time can tell. This is the first video of a 3-part miniseries exploring the field of neuromarketing. If you enjoyed what you watched, click the next video to continue learning about the limitations and challenges of neuromarketing.